Hi and welcome. It's great to see you. And with us today, we've got Sam Sheppard. Sam has the has a dubious advantage or disadvantage or claim to fame anyway of working with me in Kingswood for a couple of years as my assistant type person. And
I was not your assistant.
Well, it's more like, I think Sam was more like my responsible grown-up carer. But it was great to work with Sam. And Sam is now, well, Sam, do you want to tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Who am I? I'm a vicar, sort of, at Christchurch, Hengrove in South Bristol. I meant to wear a collar. I've got one and I forgot to put it on.
But instead you've got a Pearl Jam t-shirt, so that's all right.
Yeah, I know. But I just feel like the collar, like, I don't know, it distracts from the receding hairline and the kind of lack of personality, because people see the collar and they see the collar and the kind of and everything else, and it's confusing for them because I'm a vicar and I'm not a middle-aged white guy. And I am a white guy, but
yeah.
Yeah, so answer the question properly, Sam. I'm vicar in Christchurch, Hengrove in South Bristol. I've served in South Bristol for the last 4 years. I served my curacy in St Barnabas in Knoll West. If you're Bristolian, you probably know the name Knoll West, but it's good. I liked it there. I don't think there's anything else really notable about me. I think I kind of garnered a reputation for being interesting. I'm not entirely sure I deserve it.
You're the man who proposed to your now wife in the monkey enclosure at Bristol Zoo. That's got to be interesting.
Well, that's not quite. Yeah, I proposed at Bristol Zoo. It's true. And then we went straight to the monkey enclosure. I didn't actually propose in the monkey enclosure. I mean, at the time, that ring was like £200 or something, and that was a lot of money for me at the time because I was only like 20. And I wasn't stupid enough to I've seen it on the telly. I know that monkeys take stuff. I'm not a total idiot.
Okay, we probably better start talking sense. And one of the things you've done, Sam, is is alongside all your parish ministry, is you also have blogged and done your a podcast for a while as well. And one of the things
I mostly podcast, not rather. Sorry, mate, I didn't mean to talk over you. Okay, I mostly do podcasts, not blogs, because I don't really enjoy. I like talking to people. I don't really enjoy writing. I do occasionally write, but.
But on one occasion, you put up on my blog as a sort of a guest author about mental health stuff, which was my one of my most popular hits. It's always the way, isn't it? and also
no resentment there at all. No,
yeah, no,
I'm not getting any hint of jealousy or.
And also, I remember you putting some stuff out there about your on your podcast about mental health and stuff. Do you want to just say a little bit about that? Because I mean, I've also struggled with depression-y stuff, and for me, admitting that I was a Christian, I was a vicar, and I struggled with depression-y stuff felt like a really big thing to admit. And like I say, you did similar thing and were very brave. So do you want to share I don't know. There's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hate it when I say that's really annoying thing about seeing recordings of myself every week. So I spoke about mental health. I speak about mental health quite openly. I have done for a year or two now. I have two official conditions. I have a generalized anxiety disorder, which means I'm. Am I allowed to swear? I probably shouldn't. I nearly swore.
I think you can swear. It's all right.
I can become frightened or anxious for no reason. Probably the one that affects me most. So generalized anxiety disorder. I also have body dysmorphia, which means I look in the mirror and see an obese, ugly person, which is why videos of myself are quite difficult and leading services like online. That's the one in the last year where we're kind of doing videos every week and stuff, and just having to edit my own videos, and it's just very, very difficult for me. So I've spoken quite openly about that. I think it started probably with a sermon. We did a service. I felt that God was calling me to talk more openly about mental health, which I didn't really want to do, but I did anyway. And I started just mentioning it, just talking like casually about it, and that kind of built up to what we called Mental Health Sunday, which was a big kind of. Well, I didn't mean it to be a big thing. I didn't intend for it to be a big thing. Like Andy said, it got quite a lot of attention. I didn't mean it to be that way. It was just meant to be sort of a Sunday in our church where we prayed for people with mental illnesses. We prayed for kind of we got loads of we got everybody to write down the names of their own names or people they know or cared about that struggle with mental illness, and we stuck them to the altar where I presided at, and I preached about my own mental illness, and I stood up and said that this is me, this is how my life is, this is a reality of my life, here is the theology of mental illness, because people don't do that enough. They say like, because people don't talk about it, because people don't speak openly about mental health, we kind of start to get this idea that that it's not okay, that Christians, if you're a real Christian, if you have real faith, you're not going to have mental health issues. And I think a big part of the reason we think that subconsciously is because people don't talk about it at the top of the front. People don't preach on it from pulpits. They don't give the theology of mental illness, which, for the record, is basically the same as theology of any other illness. So I didn't really mean it to be a big thing, but you put the talk I gave out on your blog, and it just sort of became a thing. And then podcasts, and I got asked about it by other people. Now it's become like my specialist area, which I really shouldn't be, because I'm in no way qualified to talk about mental health or do anything else. I'm in no way qualified to do anything.
But I think there's something quite interesting. We did a recent blog where someone talked about sex addiction and some of these sort of stuff, and we were talking on the vlog, and one of the comments I got back afterwards was, it is so rare to see both blokes being vulnerable and Christian blokes being vulnerable and Christian leaders being vulnerable, and so actually when you have the three together, sometimes you have.
But I don't think that. I think vulnerability is a really good word. I come from an environment, I suppose, where men are supposed to be kind of manly and masculine, and I'm quite, the hair is misleading. I'm quite a masculine, I'm a big sort of blokey kind of bloke. I'm not sensitive. I'm not kind of touchy feely sort of person. What that means is, like, because I feel like to be manly, I've got to like suppress my feelings. They build up and cause me all sorts of problems. And suicide in men is really terrifying. The rates of suicide in adult men is really alarming. And I think
it isn't the second highest killer of men under 30. Is that right?
It's ridiculous. The numbers are just. And the fact is, in churches, to an extent, and I say this as a church leader, as a vicar, as incumbent status, and that means if you're church vicar, that might mean something to you. That is, in churches, in large part, our fault. Church leaders need to take responsibility for that. We have harboured this idea that it's not okay to have feelings and talk honestly and be vulnerable. And church leaders have done this kind of. When we did the mental health thing, I told some colleagues. And I told my spiritual director that I was planning to do it, because I'm really nervous about it, because I was about to stand up in front of a church full of people and just lay out my problems, and then try and explain them, and I was really worried about it. So I said about it, and two priests who are senior to me, it's not fair to name them because they didn't mean, they meant well, advised me not to do it, so it wasn't a very good idea, and they basically said, you need to be as leader, you need to be a strong leader. You can't show your vulnerabilities like that. And my spiritual director sort of, he didn't tell me I shouldn't do it, but he told me I should anonymize it. I should talk about a person who has these problems, as opposed to standing up and saying, this is me, these are my issues. And frankly, I just think that that's terrible leadership, to pretend to be like without problems, and to present yourself as this kind of strong. And I know what they're saying. They're basically trying to say that, like, you as the leader, you need to be strong and reliable, and someone that your church can count on. But the fact is, pretending I don't have problems that everybody has isn't helping them. Isn't helping my church. It's not modeling a good example of Christian life. It's not modeling a good example of how to deal with everyday problems as a Christian. And it's bad leadership. As I said, I don't think that Jesus modeled strong leadership. At the risk of being controversial now, I'm aware that Andy has a lot of evangelicals and conservatives in his following, and they don't tend to like me.
They don't like me much anymore, I don't think.
I don't think Jesus. You ever see that preacher that said if Jesus was around today, he'd drive a Jeep? I don't think he would. I just don't think he would. I think that what Jesus demonstrated was weak leadership. Jesus demonstrated how to lead from weakness, how to lead from the bottom, not the top. He served, he washed people's feet, he walked everywhere, he helped people and healed people. He was hands-on and physical, and I just think that Jesus didn't stand at the front and say and present himself as a strong and powerful leader. He presented himself as a weak leader, and I think that's the leadership that the church leaders should be modeling. We should be leading like Jesus, which means being weak, being vulnerable, putting ourselves at the bottom, not the top.
Yeah.
Go on.
I completely agree, and in fact, for me, this is slightly different because it's not quite talking about mental health, but it's still connected. The thing that deeply challenged me most about leadership were two things, really. One was when I worked in the Priory Clinic for drug and alcohol addiction, and the leader of the group was the counsellor, who was himself an addict in recovery. And the fact that actually he was saying, you know, I am an addict, I struggle. His vulnerability actually and his recovery, even though it was often wobbly and struggling, was what enabled the group to flourish. And when I was thinking about this model of leadership of which we see in Alcoholics Anonymous and other groups, where the leader is openly broken and openly vulnerable, enables the group to be open and vulnerable. And then when I started reading about that, I came across a guy called Henry Nouwen, who talks about leadership being the wounded healer. That to actually pretend we're not wounded, we're not broken, we're not hurting is ridiculous. In fact, Paul talks, and this is different because he's talking about sin, but Paul talks about how he has, the good he wants to do, he doesn't do, and the wrong things he doesn't want to do, he does do. And actually realizing that even Paul who's often presented as a very strong leader, is saying, actually, I'm screwed up, I'm broken, I need Jesus. You know.
Well, I mean, and again, I think, and I say this like, I suppose I could be heard as you know, rallying against the institution and leadership and priests and stuff. I am a priest. I'm a Church of England priest. I serve in the Church of England Church. I'm quite happy to nail my colours to that mast and say, you know, I'm Church of England. So I'm attacking myself as much as anybody else when I say that we have not led well in this respect. We've not done a good job in this respect. That to pretend for a start to pretend to be something I'm not, because I am messed up. You know, I've got issues. I've got deep problems. To pretend I don't just utterly lacks integrity. To pretend to this church, who are a wonderful church, you know, who deserve integrity, who deserve a leader and a priest of integrity. To pretend that I don't have problems just utterly lacks integrity. But as well as that, it just doesn't set a good example. It just doesn't set a kind of. It just doesn't. What we end up doing is we put ourselves, I think people somewhat, and then we put ourselves on these pedestals where we're kind of the church leader, the great holy person that is at the top of everything. And what we then do, because our egos kind of make us do it, because we like being seen that way on some level, we like being, and I'm no better than anybody else. I love it when people pat me on the back all the time and tell me how brilliant I am. Of course I do, because I'm a vain, shallow creature. But what I do,
yeah.
No, I am, because I'm a human being, and we're all like that. Yeah. And people, when I'm up on this pedestal, I enjoy being up on this pedestal, but what it does is people in my church look up to the holy person. They go, what a great holy person. I could never be like that. And that's not Christianity. That's not what we believe in.
No, opposite what we believe in.
I think we let ourselves, I think leaders and priests, we've let ourselves, because it strokes our ego, because we're shallow and insecure, we've let ourselves be put on a pedestal where we don't belong. I'm not any better than anyone else in my church. And because I'm the priest, I'm not the priest because I'm the better Christian or I'm a holier person. And that's my call. That's where God has put me. Where God has called everybody else in my church is equally important and valid. We all bring something to the table. We all do something different. But if I present myself as this unattainable holy person, then they're never going to. You know, nobody's ever going to move forward. Nobody's ever going to progress or learn. All that I do by putting myself on this pedestal is make my whole church feel rubbish about themselves, feel like they couldn't possibly do this, and that practicing Christian faith is unattainable.
I think there's two things I'd like to come back on that, really. The first is about modelling vulnerability. I think is something we need to do more often. And actually, if we know in things like our home groups, our life groups, actually, if people are prepared, if you're modelling the fact that it's okay to talk about real stuff, you give permission, if you like, for other people to start saying, actually, I'm broken. And actually, the other thing I want to come back with is sort of shame and secrecy. You know, sometimes when we don't share or we're not honest about stuff, when it becomes like a hidden secret or something we're ashamed of, that in itself can become a really corrosive and damaging thing, that you're worried that people are going to find out that I struggle with depression, or you're going to worry that people find out that you're doing this, what do you mean? Actually, you're almost, when we keep things secret, it ends up eating away at us and is negative. But actually, when we are open and almost let the light in, to use a Jesus example, it enables stuff to be used for God's glory.
Andy's got a really difficult job here because Andy's listeners. Hi, because if you let me talk for too long, I start preaching. It just kind of happens.
Me too.
So it's hard for him to get a word in edgeways with me here, which is unusual. I'm sure he's used to being the other way around. I'm a massive believer in honesty and openness, and it can be frustrating because I think, to be honest, like us, certainly in the Church of England, but I doubt it's unique to us, our system can at times be quite showed, and there are reasons for that, but like I really believe in leading from a place of something stuck in an earring. Embarrassing. From leading from a place of openness and vulnerability and being honest about who you are and what your flaws are. And the great thing about that is it's really hard for anyone to level anything against me. It's really hard for anyone to say, like you said about being found out. Nobody's ever going to find me out because I'm not pretending to be any better than I am.
Yeah.
But you can't really, if someone stands up and says, "You're the worst priest we've ever had," I can go, "Okay." I'm okay with that. I accept that possibility. I'm not trying to convince you. If someone says that you've got problems, you have doubts all the time, and you don't pray as much as you should. Yeah, quite agree. Yeah, I'm on board. I agree. And in a way, that kind of honesty makes us all a lot safer because you can't be knocked off of a pedestal that you're not on.
No, that's true.
And the other thing, what you said is like, one of the things I'm most proud of at St Barnabas, I served at St Barnabas for 3 years, and Norwest has got a reputation for being quite a rough area, and there's some truth in it. But honestly, I love serving there. It's a privilege to serve there, and a wonderful place to live and to work. But probably the thing I'm most proud of in that church is that after I stood up in front of the whole church and said, like, these are my problems. As I said, generalized anxiety disorder, body dysmorphia. These are my problems. I struggle with this every day. There are nights when I can go a week without sleeping because I have nightmares every time I fall asleep and wake up screaming, and then you don't want to go back to sleep. It's a funny thing. If you've woken up screaming because of nightmares, it's really hard to go back to sleep. I stood up and said this to the church. Said, "Look, this is the theology of this. It is not wrong. You are not broken. You've nothing to be ashamed of. God doesn't hate you. You're not a bad Christian because you've got these problems." Once I did it, everybody else did it too. So once I spoke openly about my issues, what I found was suddenly it became totally normal in that church for people to talk openly about mental illness. People would come in on a Sunday, and after church on Sunday, I don't know if you remember when we used to have coffee after church on Sunday. We'd have these really superficial and pointless conversations after church. Where it's like really just general Christian-y pleasantness, because that's just what you're supposed to do after church. Instead of that, what started happening was someone with depression, when someone said, the right answer, when someone says to you after church, how's your week been? The right answer is, yeah, good, it's been lovely. What would happen, instead of lying about the week being great, someone would say, yeah, actually, I've had a really difficult week. I'm really depressed this week. I'm really struggling this week. And it became totally normal. After I did that from the front, I think after I modeled that, it's a really arrogant thing to say, after I did this, I'm using the word I too much. But after preaching on it from the front, what suddenly happened was everybody else started being open about it. And that, at the end of the day, is the responsibility of leadership to show that, to stand up and say these things, because nobody thinks it. Nobody thinks that. Probably, some of you listening, unfortunately, probably have terrible priests and ministers, leaders, whatever you call them, that are atrocious human beings and shouldn't have their jobs, and probably would say that because of your mental health issues, you're a bad Christian and lack faith. And those people, I just want to unequivocally, I know it's not the point, but I just want to unequivocally say those people are wrong and they should never be allowed to preach again. But probably most of you, 99% of you, your priest or your pastor or your church leader doesn't think because you have a mental illness that you're a bad Christian. They probably, just like I've always thought, it's not a sinful. It's just like any other illness. It should be prayed for and supported. The church should be supporting you just like they would if you had any other sort of problem. And we hope and we think that people will implicitly just know that if people are struggling with mental illness, that they'll come and talk to you, but they won't, because the fact is, when we never talk about something, when we don't say things out loud, what we imply is that there's a problem. We don't mean to, but by never talking about mental illness, by never saying it from the front, by never preaching on it in the pulpit, we imply that there's a problem, that there's something wrong. And people, they never hear it said. And so they kind of like feel like because they've never heard it said, it must be sinful somehow. And people create these ideas, and especially if you've got anxiety, like I have a condition that means my brain lies to me. So like, of course, I'm going to come to the conclusion that my mental health is sinful. Of course I am. And I think we need to talk about these things because that's what breaks the stigma. That's what makes people realize it's okay to have these problems and to talk about it. If we don't, it's our responsibility as leaders. And also it's our responsibility as Christians, I think, to speak openly about mental health in church and with Christian friends, and just make it clear that this is not a sin. This is not a problem. This is normal. This is 1 in 4 people, right? So either you or someone is significantly affected by mental health issues, and yet we never talk about it.
And also, one of the things is going through your life. Most of us will have a period. We'll have, even if we don't habitually have mental health problems, we will have seasons where we have mental health problems. You have times where you're ill, just like you have times where you're ill physically, and there are other times where you're. So even if you haven't got problems at the moment, you may have a time where your mental health is poor later on.
And you ought to be able to come to your church or your pastoral team or whatever structure your church takes. You ought to be able to come to the person in church that you go to for support and say, I've been feeling really depressed. I've had suicidal thoughts. I keep having disassociated periods. You ought to be able to come and just say that. But if we don't make it clear, then it won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's something about accountability too there, because I mean, when it got really bad. After I'd left ministry and my marriage was all not great and stuff, I ended up self-harming. I think as people I've been fairly open about. And again, having accountability that, people asking, was I doing it? And, the accountability helped me get through to a point where I'm not doing it anymore. And, Jim, and actually that's, we need those things. Other thing I'd say, obviously, is always great to, if you're struggling with mental health stuff, always good to see your doctor and to do all those.
Oh yeah, we probably should have mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't get on with doctors. I prefer to pretend there's not a problem.
which isn't what
I'm aware of the irony. There's a running joke with preachers. If you ever want to know what a preacher struggles with the most, listen to their sermons. I preach a lot about seeking help. I don't do it very often.
Yeah.
Do as I say, not as I do. That's the line, isn't it?
But also, I think one of the reasons why, I preach a lot on God's awesome love and grace, because sometimes that's something I don't always feel, and again, it's that going back to what I believe to be true, is that ultimately that's what matters. In fact, I often describe preaching as the best version of myself having a word with the worst version of myself.
We definitely preach. I think preaching's. Oh, I nearly said something I shouldn't say. I was about to say I think preaching's pointless. I don't think preaching's pointless. I just think that, okay, so like the average adult can listen for 7 minutes, right? That's what studies suggest. The average adult can take in 7 minutes of talking in that format, one person talking. So if you're only capable of taking in 7 minutes of me speaking, what is the point of me speaking for more than 7 minutes? But you try and broach that with preachers, going on 15, 20, 25 minutes, and you still, nobody was listening. Nobody was listening. You've wasted my time. You've wasted your time. You've wasted everybody else's time. And I just think, I don't know. I try and preach like effectively. I preach, at least once a week, but I try and preach in a kind of way that I'm going to say one thing, I'm going to say it really well, and I'm going to try and make sure you understood me. But not that they ever do, because it's pointless. They don't listen to me. I preached on Trinity Sunday on heresy, on the heresy that inevitably comes out when you try and explain the Trinity. So when you try and explain the concept of Trinity, you will almost certainly be a little bit wrong. And I gave some examples. I said people have tried to say the Trinity is like water because water can be ice, it can be water, it can be gas. But they're all three different things, but they're all one thing. But that is actually heresy, because water and gas are essentially the same thing. And we're not trying to say that God and the Holy Spirit are the same thing. And I preached a sermon after church. Someone said to me, "Oh, I really liked your sermon today, Vicar. It was really good. It was really helpful what you said about God being like water and ice and gas." That's what I said he wasn't. That's the one thing I said definitely wasn't true. And that's all they took away from it. Because that's how it works, because they're not listening. That's a total aside, and just revealed me to be terrible.
What a good one, though. Sam, thank you so much. It's been brilliant to chat to you. And like I say, if anyone is struggling with any of this stuff, do chat to your doctor, do chat to a Christian who you know loves you and is for you, and do just the one thing I think we really want people to hear is that God loves you, and actually it's not you being, your mental health, like any other health, is, what was it, your great quote? The theology of mental health is much the same as any other form of being sick or poorly or broken.
Well, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't say you're trying to sign off when I'm still talking. You wouldn't say that, like, if someone had broken their leg, you wouldn't go, oh, you sinned. So
it depends how they broke their leg.
If you're having a manic episode, you haven't sinned. It's just an illness. It's just like anything else.
Yeah.
And we need to get rid of this idea that mental health is somehow worse than physical health or sinful. It's not. It's not. And actually, I feel I said this recently. This is why people don't like me, because I can be a little bit blunt. When people dismiss that, when people try and say stuff like, oh, you only have these problems because you don't pray deeply, because you don't believe that God can heal you. You're killing people. People are literally killing themselves. And to say that you just need to pray more is simply not good enough. And church leaders just need to do a better job.
Brilliant. I think that's a great word to end on. Thank you so much, Sam. Bless you.